What's up guys, Justin here with the CGEssentials.com. So in today's video, we're going to check out some of the stuff that's been added in the Sanctus Procedural Materials library add-on. So let's go ahead and just jump into it. All right, so I already talked about this probably a couple weeks ago, and there's already been a new version rolled out with additional materials contained inside of it. And so again, Sanctus Library is a tool that's designed to basically let you create procedural materials inside of Blender. So it allows you to adjust things like different sliders and different settings for materials in order to give them different looks. So you can see this example of the stone tile floor. We'll look at some of this inside of Blender in just a second. And so I wanted to take a look at the new version 2.0, and some of the materials that are contained inside of that, as well as looking at what's coming up. I wanted to start with what's coming up because one of the cool things about this particular add-on is when Sanctus rolls out new materials, if you purchase this, and it is currently on sale through next Monday in the Blender Market sale, but anytime Sanctus rolls out new materials, you get free updates with new materials. So it even says that on this page. One great place to go in order to look at what's coming up is going to his website right here, Sanctus Library XYZ, and he's actually got a slider on here on the front of his website showing you what's coming up. So some of these materials I am super excited about. I've seen them on Twitter and they look great. So for example, the procedural old wall, which isn't in this version, by the way, it's going to be in the next update, but this procedural old wall basically creates like stucco on top of a brick material, and then you can kind of adjust where the stucco is worn, other things like that. So that one's going to be super interesting. The old wood planks also looks really interesting. So you can basically adjust where the paint is stripped off of the material. And then the hair shader looks really interesting as well, the hair and fur. So those are ones that are coming out in the future. In version 2, there's still some really interesting features contained inside of it. So for example, he's rolled out some additional shader tools, which are basically tools with like damages and textures and patterns that you can apply to your materials in order to kind of customize those different materials. So there's also an improved asset library version, which basically has better thumbnails and respects the same categories as the add-on. So that's been an improvement. You've also got some new materials. So the cycles glass, the ceramic hex tiles, as well as some architectural glass types, but then also some new icons to help you identify things about materials. So if you look in the lower right hand corner, you've got the green, yellow, or red, which is going to be the processing time for different materials, as well as a letter in the lower right hand corner to let you know if something is recommended for either Eevee or cycles. So if there's something that works in one engine better than the others, you can now see that in the little thumbnails associated with the different materials. Now let's jump over into Blender and take a look at some of the materials. So he actually ships it with a version that works with the asset browser. So you can actually go through here and see his different materials and other things. They're actually set up with these different divisions, other things like that, which again is super cool. But I just wanted to take a look at a few of the things that are in here. So I think we've got some more tiles than we had before, as well as some different architectural glasses. And we can kind of take a look at what those do. So for example, let's drop in one of the aging tiles. Doesn't really matter which one, but we're gonna drop this in. One thing you wanna do when you're looking at your tile material is you wanna remember that a lot of the displacement and stuff is only gonna work inside a rendered mode. And these do take a little while to compile because they're very procedural and there's a lot of stuff going on in the background. That is one thing that I'll say is they are kind of heavy because it's doing all the procedural stuff contained inside of here. So that is just something to be aware of. You might use them in like 1 or 2 locations instead of like everywhere. And so what you want to pay attention to with any of the materials inside of this right here is you want to jump over into your shading editor, and you can actually adjust the settings of the material. So we've got this aging tiles material selected right here. And if we take a look at this, notice how it's going to give you the option for either adjusting to a simplified node or an advanced node. So the simplified node, if I drag this over here, is basically going to use the simplified settings, right? And I can use this to adjust things like the age of the tiles. So if I bring these up, right, it's going to like automatically remove some of the tile that's in here. You can also adjust the seed if you don't like the way that that looks in here. So that's going to kind of randomize that location. You can also though go over into your more advanced settings over here on the right hand side, and you can toggle that so that it's actually you're going to put it on either 0 or 1. If you put it on 1, you get access to all of these advanced settings in here. And so if you use the more advanced settings, you can adjust things like the mortar width, So notice how the mortar's getting wider the more that I adjust this, as well as other things like how the corners work on here. So if I adjust my corners, right, notice how those corners are going to get more round in here. So all of this adjusts. You can also adjust like your different damaged tiles, other things like that. So each one of these has its own different settings that you can adjust. So let's say we didn't want to go with this tile, which by the way, again, is a really heavy material. So my computer is really slowing down trying to run this one. But I mean, it kind of makes sense again, because it's doing all this procedural stuff in the background. But if we scroll down, we've got like these ceramic hex tiles, for example. And I could drag these ceramic hex tiles in here. And again, we're gonna have to wait for this to compile. So it's gonna take a minute. So again, you've got your tiles in here, but then you've also got the options in here that you can adjust. So this one, for example, is gonna let you adjust things like the scale of those tiles to make them bigger or smaller. You can set how rounded the corners are between the different tiles. You want to be a little bit careful with that one, but not really that big of a deal. You can also adjust things like the tilt. And so the tilt and some of the displacement is only going to show up inside of your rendered mode. So for example, I'm going to set this to cycles right here. And one thing you want to make sure when you do this is we're going to set this to cycles. I'm going to leave this on GPU render. And you're going to want to make sure that you've got the experimental feature set on. And you want to add a subdivision surface modifier set to simple with the adaptive subdivision turned on. But now, if I jump over into rendered mode real quick, and I'm sorry, I can't show this to you as well as I would like, because for whatever reason, when I'm doing stuff in cycles and I make a change, it like crashes out my screen recording software. But if you look at this, right, you can adjust things like the paint, but you've also got displacement going on in here. So you've got like ups and downs at the mortar joints. So things that are really going to affect the way this overall thing looks. And so let's say that I was to do like a 0.5 for paint. You can actually make this look like the tile had different paints painted over it in the past, and then it's worn off. So just another one of those cool things that's going on with this procedural material. So you've also got some fun ones in here, like these stylized planks, where this is actually coming in here. And again, remember that we're not seeing the displacement because I'm not rendering it out right here, but you've got this like stylized wood plank material that you can use to adjust your plank width and height, other things like that. And you can use this in order to generate this kind of like stylized plank material. And again, because it's all procedural, it's really easy to make adjustments and changes in order to customize this. So you can also adjust things like your different colors. So if you wanted this to be like lighter, for example, I could come in here and I can make the adjustment just like that. So just kind of a fun material. And again, when you render it out, there is displacement and stuff, so it's going to look better, but just kind of a fun stylized material. So there's also some fun like paints and metals in here. So you've obviously got your car paints that are in here. Those are going to be pretty typical to car paints. But notice how they've got all the flecks and stuff kind of built in here. But then you've also got things like your rough bronze or your like camo materials or other things like that. And again, these are all set up where you can adjust them. So all of your metals are going to be adjustable. So like, for example, this one's got kind of the rough bronze. And again, remember this is in here as a material. So let's say that I was to adjust this a little bit. So we'll go to wireframe. And if we were to adjust this object, notice how that material is still being applied over the whole thing. But if we go in and take a look at it inside of our shader editor, take a look at the shader, there's going to be things you can adjust like the scale of that material that's in here. So you can scale it up or down, as well as the bumpiness. So we can adjust the bump, and notice how this gets more pronounced when we adjust that bump. So again, just super easy to add this material that's in here. So you've also got things like these SciFi panels, which are really interesting. So again, they're like fully adjustable, so you can adjust the panels that are in here. You can also adjust the scale of those panels as well as the brightness of like the lights that are in here. So these are like emissive lights, and you can set this where some lights are missing, some lights aren't, other things like that. You can also adjust things like the grid scale that's in here. So this little grid that's in here is all procedural. So you can adjust that, and the grime amount that's in here. So just a super interesting, there's a lot of interesting possibilities with procedural materials like this. And then I'm not going to get too far into like the cloths and the chainmails and stuff, but you've also got like chainmail, you've got fabric, you've got jeans and leather, just a bunch of procedural materials. And note that Sanctus is currently continuing to add to this material library. as well. All right, so remember that this is on sale through next Monday. So if you have been kind of interested in picking it up, this would be a good time to check it out. Like I said, make sure that you've got a computer that can actually run procedural materials, because it is a little bit graphics card intensive, but it's still a lot of fun to play around with, and it's got a lot of interesting possibilities. So leave a comment below, let me know what you thought. As always, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks, guys.